London, 1858. The heart of the world's most powerful empire was rotting from within. A relentless heat wave had turned the Thames into a stagnant black vein of human waste and decaying remains. This was the Great Stink, a moment so foul it threatened to bring the British government to its knees. The air itself felt like a poison, a thick miasma that settled over the city like a funeral shroud. For decades, London had ignored the consequences of its growth, but now the river was demanding its due. It wasn't just a smell, it was a sensory nightmare that defined a catastrophic failure of civilization. Inside the halls of power, the scent of death was unavoidable. The Victorian mind lived in terror of miasma, the belief that foul odors alone carried disease. In the Houses of Parliament, lawmakers were collapsing at their desks. They attempted to block the windows with curtains soaked in chloride of lime, pressing handkerchiefs to their faces in a desperate, futile defense. They believed the air was the killer, never suspecting that the true assassin was the very water they used to brew their tea. Cholera was a ghost that haunted the slums, but now it was knocking on the doors of the wealthy. The invisible threat was more terrifying than any army, and the city was gripped by a panic that bordered on madness. The stench was a herald of an impending apocalypse. To understand how London fell so far, we must look back 5 millennia to the windswept Orkney Islands. In the Neolithic village of Skara Brae, humanity had already mastered the impossible: indoor plumbing. While we view these people as primitive, they built stone huts with sophisticated drainage systems that carried waste away with the tides. It was a stroke of genius etched in stone, a level of hygiene that wouldn't be seen again for thousands of years. They understood the basic necessity of separation, the living from the waste. Yet this ancient wisdom was somehow forgotten, buried under the weight of time. The question remains, how did a civilization so old get it so right, only for us to lose it all? By 1700 BC, on the island of Crete, the Minoans were living in a subterranean marvel. The Palace of Knossos featured complex clay pipes and the world's first flushing systems, powered by rainwater. They treated water as a sacred resource and waste as a problem to be engineered away. These were architects of comfort, building a world that felt modern even by today's standards. But like Skara Brae, the Minoan secrets were lost to cataclysm and time. We see a pattern emerging, a cycle of discovery and collective amnesia. Humanity would repeatedly find the cure for its own filth, only to let it slip through its fingers. The darkness of history is often paved with such forgotten innovations. But the smell isn't just offensive, it's a herald of death. Tens of thousands are dying, their insides liquefying from cholera. When Rome fell, the sewers died with it. For 1,000 years, Europe descended into a dark age of filth. The Cloaca Maxima, once the pride of the empire, became a choked ruin. Cities grew upward, but their waste stayed on the streets. People lived in a constant cycle of self-inflicted plague, throwing their night soil directly out of windows with a warning cry of "Gardy-loo." The streets were open sewers, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. The knowledge of the ancients was replaced by superstition and a grim acceptance of early death. This was a millennium where humanity chose to live in its own refuse, a period of regression that cost millions of lives. In the 1590s, a flicker of hope appeared in the court of Queen Elizabeth I. Sir John Harington, a poet and jester, presented the Queen with a miracle, the first modern flush toilet, which he named the Ajax. It worked, and the Queen even had one installed in Richmond Palace. But Harington was a satirist, a man who loved to mock the powerful. Because the inventor was seen as a clown, his invention was dismissed as a joke. A device that could have prevented the coming plagues was laughed into obscurity for 2 centuries. It is a chilling thought. How many lives were lost because of a grudge in the Queen's court and the ego of an inventor? How did a primitive civilization master plumbing while medieval kings were still throwing their waste out of windows? The knowledge vanished. Then there is the myth of Thomas Crapper. He didn't invent the flush toilet, but he was a marketing genius. He put his name on every bowl his company sold, ensuring his legacy was literally etched in porcelain. When American soldiers arrived in England during World War I, they saw T. Crapper on every latrine, and a brand name became a slur. He understood that history doesn't always remember the inventor. It remembers the man who can sell the dream. Crapper turned sanitation into a business, but in doing so, he overshadowed the engineers who actually solved the deadly problems of the Victorian era. He became the face of a revolution he didn't start. As the Great Stink reached its peak in 1858, one man stood ready to descend into the underworld. Joseph Bazalgette was an engineer with a vision that bordered on the megalomaniacal. He proposed a subterranean network of over 2,100 miles of sewers, a project of such scale it was deemed impossible. He didn't just want to build pipes, he wanted to build a subterranean cathedral of filth that would serve London for centuries. Bazalgette understood that the city's survival depended on its hidden infrastructure. He fought for the funding, battled the skeptics, and eventually began carving a new world out of the London mud. It was the most ambitious engineering feat of the Victorian age. Bazalgette's sewers were built with an obsession for quality. He used Portland cement, a relatively new material at the time, to ensure the tunnels would withstand the test of time. Over 300 million bricks were laid by hand in the dark, damp belly of the city. These tunnels were designed to carry waste away from the river and toward treatment plants at the city's edge. It was a masterpiece of Victorian brickwork, a hidden monument to human ingenuity. But as the tunnels grew, so did the cost, and the question of where all that waste was actually going became a terrifying mystery for those who looked beyond the city walls. Bazalgette was cleaning London, but at what cost to the world outside? To move the waste, Bazalgette built palaces for filth. The pumping stations like Crossness were masterpieces of Victorian Gothic architecture, filled with massive, ornate steam engines. These machines worked day and night, pumping millions of gallons of sewage toward the sea. They were the heart of the new system, beating in the darkness to keep the city alive. The contrast was startling. Beautiful, gilded machinery dedicated to the most repulsive task imaginable. It was a testament to the Victorian belief that even the most mundane infrastructure should be a work of art. These stations still stand today, a reminder of the time when London finally decided to face its own waste. Almost overnight, the Great Stink vanished. The new sewers worked, and for the first time in generations, the Thames began to heal. Cholera outbreaks, once a seasonal terror, became a memory of the past. Bazalgette had done the impossible. He had saved London from itself. The city could finally breathe, and the fear of the miasma faded into history. But the success of the sewers created a new illusion, the idea that our waste simply disappears once it leaves our sight. We transitioned from a crisis of presence to a crisis of absence, forgetting that every flush has a destination. The river was clean, but the cycle of consumption was only just beginning. Today, we view the toilet as a basic human right, but for billions of people, it remains an unattainable luxury. In the Victorian era, the wealthy had plumbing while the poor died in the streets. That same divide exists today on a global scale. We live in a world of high-tech smart toilets in one hemisphere and open-pit latrines in another. The Great Stink is not a historical curiosity for many. It is a daily reality. The sanitation revolution that saved London has yet to reach every corner of the earth. We have the technology, but do we have the will to ensure that no child dies from the same diseases that plagued 1858 London? Our modern systems are failing in new, invisible ways. Chemicals, microplastics, and pharmaceuticals now flow through our sewers, bypassing old treatment methods and entering the global water cycle. We are once again poisoning the very resource we depend on for life. The bad air of the Victorians has been replaced by the bad water of the 21st century. We have mastered the engineering of convenience, but we are still struggling with the ethics of consequence. The subterranean cathedrals of the past are now being choked by the waste of the future. Are we simply repeating the mistakes of the medieval age on a global chemical scale? The next sanitation revolution must be circular. We can no longer afford to waste our waste. From recovering phosphorus for agriculture to turning sewage into energy, the future of the toilet is about resource reclamation. We are moving toward a world where the bathroom is a refinery, not just a disposal site. The ancient Minoans and the people of Skara Brae understood the value of water. It is time we rediscovered that wisdom. The challenge of the 21st century is to build a system that is as sustainable as it is convenient. We must become the architects of our own survival, ensuring that the silent archive of our filth doesn't become our final legacy. We end where we began, with a choice. If you were a leader in 1858, facing a bankrupt city and a dying population, would you have prioritized the weak or the economy? Joseph Bazalgette chose humanity, and in doing so, he built the foundation of the modern world. But today, the dilemma has changed. Are you willing to change your lifestyle and pay the price for a truly sustainable future? Or will you continue to live in the illusion that your waste simply disappears? The Great Stink was a warning. The silence of our modern sewers might be an even greater one. The question is no longer how we survive our filth, but how we live with it. Thank you for joining me in the Silent Archive. This story of the Great Stink is more than a morbid curiosity. It is a mirror to our own civilization. If you found this journey through the underworld engaging, consider sharing it. But more importantly, I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you believe we have truly solved our sanitation crisis, or are we just better at hiding it? What is the one modern convenience you would sacrifice to save the planet's water? Let's start the debate below. Don't forget to follow the archive for more untold chapters of our dark history. Stay curious and stay vigilant.